Hi everybody, Richard Tromans here again, Artificial Lawyer TV. Today we're talking to Eric Laughlin, who is the CEO of Agiloft, the CLM company, which is rapidly expanding. And in fact, expansion is the subject that we're talking about. It appears, at least outwardly, that the CLM market is having a bit of a moment. There's lots of expansion, there's lots of hires, there's investments. There's actually a whole raft of companies in this space, in fact, more than probably most people realize. Just wanted to ask Eric what he thought about this and why these changes are taking place. So let's first of all, let's just go back to Eric and ask him about what his role is. So Eric, if you just tell us a bit about your role, for people who perhaps haven't seen videos of you before, tell us about Agiloft as well.
Sure. So I'm the CEO of Agiloft, which is an end-to-end contract lifecycle management software vendor. Agiloft plays in sort of the mid-market and large enterprise space within CLM, and we've been around for quite a while. We're a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And I come from a background, I've been in legal tech and legal managed services my whole career, mostly with Thomson Reuters, and then with EY. At Agiloft, I think, with most CLM, sort of people think about CLM, you got to think about sort of the visibility in your contracts and the workflow around your contracts. We take an AI approach to the visibility, and we are based on a BPM platform. So we have a very strong workflow offering as well.
Fantastic. Actually, on that point, let's just define what a CLM is, because I didn't really think about it. I'd always it's one of those things you just assume that everybody's on the same page. Yeah. But I was talking to someone the other day, it was quite clear that we had different views of what a CLM was. Mm-hmm. So how would you define one?
Yeah, I think a CLM has to be end-to-end, all the way from requesting a contract through authoring and negotiation, execution, storage, ripping out the data, as well as thinking about obligations management on the back end. And that whole thing has to be underpinned by, really good workflow, very good data insights, and then the ability to take action on the data. If you have all those things together, you've got CLM. If you have any one part of them, you have, a bit of software tech. Yeah, so contract tech.
Gotcha. So, I mean, ultimately, I suppose the CLM effectively is the, I don't know how to describe it really. It's kind of it's the ultimate legal tech, because it captures everything except for the litigation bit. It's got the whole lot.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it's the ultimate legal tech, because I've started thinking of it as it's graduated from legal tech, and now it's enterprise tech. Yeah, it's enterprise technology, and I think that's important, because I think when you think about the information architecture of a company, you have a lot of first-class citizens that are in there that there might be household names like a Workday or Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce. You have systems all around that hold really critical company data, and until recently, the CLM suite hadn't asserted its sort of self into that architecture, and now it has. So it's enterprise tech.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, perhaps for another day we could talk about, does legal tech exist? Is it just
do all of our lives have meaning? Yes, Richard, it's a good question.
Well, I suppose is legal tech only a thing because lawyers want to differentiate it from other types of technology, whereas in reality it's just stuff that moves data around or holds data or helps you to produce data?
I love that topic, so we can touch on it later or come back.
Okay, well, maybe we could do a little bonus couple of minutes at the end. Well, let's get into the meat of this, the enchilada, which is there actually something happening in CLM, or is it just people like me getting excited because they see lots of investments and stuff happening? Do you actually sense a change?
So, I mean, I do. I've been in the contracts world on the services side and on the software side for quite some time now, and it feels different to me. But Richard, I totally understand what you're saying as well around, it's easy to get excited about the investments, right? We took a $45 million investment. There's been a bunch of other investments in the news recently. And so you see sort of money flowing in. That could mean that there's a bubble, right? People are just getting excited, or it could mean, something different. I happen to think that it is, smart investors waking up to something that actually is taking hold in our space. And I think what the investors are getting excited about is that, as more and more buying happens, as large enterprises are actually buying into CLM, there is a lot of money there. And I mentioned just already that I think, CLM is taking its place in, that enterprise sort of information architecture of the company. And smart investors see that and they think, well, I didn't get to invest in Salesforce, right? I didn't get to invest in Workday, but I'd love to be investing in the next one of those that sits in the CLM space. And so I think, there's a reason that the money is flowing in. It's because the opportunity is real. I suppose that you have to dive one level deeper to see why is that buying happening. And I think that's just probably more interesting.
Well, yeah, exactly. Segues nicely into the next question, which is, I mean, this is being triggered presumably by general counsel and those legal teams large enough to have senior legal ops people who the general counsel listen to.
Yeah.
Is that what's driving it? And if that is what's driving it, what's triggering the change? Is it because they've seen the ability of NLP to take some of the pressure off their own teams? Like you give someone a CLM system, and you say, well, there you go. Yeah, you've only got to ingest, 4.5 million contracts by yourself. Bye, see you, and thanks for the money. Which of course isn't a great situation to be in. Or and maybe they look at the NLP and they say, oh, actually, this is really going to help us. We can speed this process. It's far less labor intensive. It's not going to be so expensive, and that's what's greasing the wheels of change. Or is it something else?
Yeah, there's absolutely something to that. I think, for a long time now, companies who've been focused on just drawing the insight out of contracts have been sort of slowly creeping up. And I think about the great job that Noah and his team have done over at Kira and really making that promise come true, that you can more easily pull the data out of contracts. And so I think that's the awareness of that has been growing and growing. And frankly, the tech has been getting better and better. It's certainly not perfect, but you can get a lot of what you're looking for out of that. I think there's still an awareness that people are building as to the full extent of CLM. So we talked before about what that definition is, and only one part of that was drawing the insight out of the document. So a lot of it is actually, doing a better job, with the workflow before the contract, gets signed, and then after once you're actually trying to perform against it. So we're hiring a lot of people at Agiloft, and so I get the chance to talk to a lot of people who are, either coming from other legal tech, parts of the ecosystem, or just coming in completely cold into legal tech. And a lot of times when I ask somebody from a different function, like a CFO's office, why is this interesting to you? And they say, well, look, I can't believe we don't have a solution like this in my own company. And so I think there is a lot of, as I sort of see that awareness happening in real time in those people, where it's not just the lawyers who now realize all this value. It's now people outside of the legal department who are realizing this value. And I think particularly in the CFO's office, where you think about the financial implications of your contracts and the data within the contracts, once that office opens up and starts seeing the value and gets that awareness, now there's another light shining on the legal department to say, yeah, we should invest in this. Those things that you've been asking for a while, we should get those for you. So I think that's a real part that's being played here.
So it's the additional input, the CFO, that's driving.
I think that's a lot of. So I think legal department has to wake up to it. They have to want it, and then they have to get support and budget for it, right? Let's just be realistic about how things work in a large enterprise. You can have a great idea, you can know something is the right thing to do for your department, but you have to fight for the budget. And so fighting for the budget, is something that, when you call something legal tech and you say, I'm going to be able to write my contracts more effectively, that just doesn't resonate outside of the legal department. When you say, we're going to increase our ability to, perform on our contracts, we're not going to miss financial opportunities. We're going to take those blind spots we used to have to the risks in our contract, and we're going to shine a light on those. Those start to, get more resonance outside of the legal department, and that resonance equals budget.
Gotcha. Well, let's just go back to a point that you mentioned earlier, which is Salesforce. They just took over the sort of CRM space, didn't they? Really, sales and CRM.
Yeah.
Is that what's going to happen with CLM? In that, it's Game of Thrones. There can only be one. There can only be one person on the throne. It's not a. It's a type of enterprise situation that you can't have 5 or 6 very, very successful CLMs.
It's a great question. People have argued that. I've heard compelling arguments the other way. I do think it's important to understand or remember what CRM sort of was before, and then what it was after, or in the Salesforce world right now. I think before CRM took its place that it's in today, I think salespeople sort of owned their own data, right? And I remember having conversations with salespeople just 10 years ago where they said, I kind of still like my own tool and I like keeping my own notes, and that's really my customer relationship. And I think what Salesforce did was made it easy to pull that data into a central system and share all that data with the rest of the enterprise. Made it easy enough and compelling enough for the salespeople to buy into that tool. And that data stopped being the sort of owned by the salesperson, and started becoming a critical company asset that was connected to marketing tools and connected to BI tools and connected to sort of the commercial operations. And I think that's what this wave of CLM is doing. It's, instead of saying this contract is just the domain of the lawyers, now it's saying the data from the contract is the domain of the business. We all own it. We have to have it in a solution that makes that data available to others. So, is that something that can only be owned by one large company? I don't think so. I think there are enough, there's enough buying going on, and there are enough companies succeeding that it seems unlikely that we're going to end up, at least in this next 3 to 5 years, with one dominant player. It's hard for me to imagine that happening.
So it's not going to be a sort of Microsoft Word total takeover.
Seems like it would be difficult to imagine that right now.
Yeah, and I guess I suppose, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because in legal tech, I'm so used to working and talking to companies that are, they've been in the market sometimes 5 or 6 years, but they might not have more than 20, 30 clients. But they've been relatively successful because these clients are very large, very global law firms or huge corporates, and they make a good living. And it's incredible, really, I think probably outside of the legal tech world, for people to come in and go, what, you have like 20 clients and you actually make good money and you're quite happy, and you've been going for like, what, 5 years? Like, yeah.
Well, maybe our sights were just set too low in legal tech, right? And I think that's part of, not just, when we talk about the transition from legal tech to enterprise tech, it's not just the buyer, it's not just the lawyer, legal departments themselves, it's the legal tech community. We have to have a much bigger sort of broader view about what we're doing.
We're coming to the end now, so we said we would touch on that. I mean, would it be easier if legal tech just dropped the word legal? But then what
I'm all for it, because I think reinventing yourself is sort of what everybody needs to do, all the time, right? As a person, you need to reinvent yourself. As a company, you've got to keep reinventing yourself. As a legal tech world, maybe we need to reinvent ourselves. It's hard for people not to put a label on themselves, so I can see why it sticks. But certainly, there's something to be said for that. I think when you think about what the contract represents, if you played word association, right? If I play word association with you right now, I say contracts, and what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Obligations.
Obligations. All right. So, and that's perfect, right? Most people, if you said contracts, would probably say lawyers, right? And so once you move from, but you've moved on, right? You've moved on from contract being like the domain of a lawyer to the contract being like something that needs to be performed, right? Something that is a business asset. And I think that's a huge difference. At the sort of I'm not gonna say it's a revolution, but when you take that to the all of its implications, now you've got something very different than legal tech. It's a sort of the contract is democratized. It's sort of acted on by lots of people. It's formed by people other than lawyers. It's the relationship DNA of the business. And I think that's a very different way of thinking about contracts.
Interesting. Well, look, fantastic. Thanks, Eric. Really insightful. And well, we look forward to seeing the winners, the shortlist winners of the game of CLM Thrones. So thank you very much.
I love it. Thanks, Richard. Bye.